Hi everyone, welcome to Kevin Reed's Philosophy. This is the second video that will be uploaded to this channel, and I will continue reading In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. Also, I'm probably going to make my last video smaller because it's like way too long. It's like 2 hours, and I highly doubt people would want to spend that long watching me read a book. So yeah, so I'll start from pages 58 to oh my god. I'll start from pages 58 to 64, and I will proceed now. And so it was that, for a long time afterwards, when I lay awake at night and revived old memories of Combray, I saw no more of it than this sort of luminous panel, sharply defined against the vague and shadowy background, like the panels which the glow of a Bengal light or a searchlight beam will cut out and illuminate in a building, the other parts of which remain plunged in darkness, broad enough at its base. The little parlor, the dining room, the opening of the dark path from which Monsieur Swann, the unwitting author of my sufferings, would emerge. The hall through which I would journey to the first step of that staircase so painful to climb was constituted all by itself the slender cone of this irregular pyramid. And at the summit, my bedroom, with a little passage through whose glazed door Mamma would enter, in a word, seen always at the same evening hour, isolated from all its possible surroundings, detached and solitary against the dark background, the bare minimum of scenery necessary, like the decor one sees prescribed on the title page of an old play, for its performance in the provinces. To the drama of my undressing, as though Combray had consisted of but 2 floors joined by a slender staircase, and as though there had been no time there but 7 o'clock at night, I must own that I could have assured any questioner that Combray did include other scenes, and did exist at other hours than these. But since the facts which I should then have recalled would have been prompted only by voluntary memory, the memory of the intellect, and since the pictures which that kind of memory shows us preserve nothing of the past itself, I should never have had any wish to ponder over this residue of Combray. To me it was in reality all dead. Permanently dead? Very possibly. There's a large element of chance in these matters, and a second chance occurrence, that of our own death, often prevents us from awaiting for any length of time the favors of the first. I feel that there is much to be said for the Celtic belief that the souls of those whom we have lost are held captive in some inferior being, in an animal, in a plant, in some inanimate object, and thus effectively lost to us until the day which to many never comes, when we happen to pass by the tree or to obtain possession of the object which forms their person. Then they start and tremble, they call us by our name, and as soon as we have recognized them the spell is broken, delivered by us, they have overcome death and return to share our life. And so it is with our own past. It is a labor in vain to attempt to recapture it. All the efforts of our intellect must prove futile. The past is hidden somewhere outside the realm, beyond the reach of intellect in some material object, and the sensation which that material object will give us, of which we have no inkling, and it depends on chance whether or not we come upon this object before we ourselves must die. Many years had elapsed during which nothing of Combray, except what lay in the theatre and the drama of my going to bed there, had any existence for me. When one day in winter, on my return home, my mother, seeing that I was cold, offered me some tea, a thing I did not ordinarily take. I declined at first, and then, for no particular reason, changed my mind. She sent for one of those squat, plump little cakes called petites madeleines, which look as though they have been molded in the fluted valve of a scallop shell, and soon mechanically dispirited after a dreary day with the prospect of a depressing moral. I raised to my lips a spoonful of the tea in which I had soaked a morsel of the cake. No sooner had the warm liquid mixed with the crumbs touched my palate than a shiver ran through me, and I stopped, intent upon the extraordinary thing that was happening to me. An exquisite pleasure had invaded my senses, something isolated, detached, with no suggestion of its origin. And at once the vicissitudes of life had become indifferent to me, its disasters innocuous, its brevity illusory, this new sensation having had the effect which love has of filling in me, it was me. I had ceased now to feel mediocre, contingent, mortal. When could it have come to me, this all-powerful joy? I sensed that it was connected with the taste of the tea and the cake, but that it infinitely transcended those savors. Could not indeed be of the same nature. Where did it come from? What did it mean? How could I seize and apprehend it? I drank a second mouthful, in which I find nothing more than in the first, then a third, which gives me a rather lust than the second. It is time to stop. The potion is losing its virtue. It is plain that the truth I am seeking being, but lies not in the cup but in myself. The drink has caught it into being but does not know it and can only repeat indefinitely, with a progressive diminution of strength, the same message which I cannot interpret, though I hope at least to be able to call it forth again and to find it there presently, intact at my disposal, for my final enlightenment. I put down the cup and examined my own mind. It alone can discover the truth, but how? What an abyss of uncertainty whenever the mind feels overtaken by itself, when it, the seeker, is at the same time the dark region through which it must go seeking and where all its equipment will avail it nothing. Seek? More than that, create. It is face to face with something which does not yet exist, which it alone can make actual, which it alone can bring into the light of day. And I begin again to ask myself what it could have been, this unremembered state which brought with it no logical proof, but the indisputable evidence of its felicity, its reality, and in whose presence other states of consciousness melted and vanished. I want to try to make it reappear. I retrace my thoughts to the moment at which I drank the first spoonful of tea. I rediscover the same state, illuminated by no fresh light. I ask myself to make one further effort, to bring back once more the fleeting sensation, and so that nothing may interrupt it in its course, I shut out every obstacle, every extraneous idea. I stop my ears and screen my attention from the sounds from the next room, and then feeling that my mind is tiring itself without having any success to report, I compel it for a change to enjoy the distraction which I have just denied it, to think of other things, to rest and refresh itself before making a final effort. And then for the second time I clear an empty space in front of me. I place in position before my mind's eye the still recent taste of that first mouthful, and I feel something start within me, something that leaves its resting place and attempts to rise, something that has been anchored at a great depth. I do not know yet what it is, but I can feel it mounting slowly. I can measure the resistance. I can hear the echo of great spaces traversed. Undoubtedly, what is this palpitating in the depths of my being must be the image, the visual memory which, being linked to that taste, is trying to follow it into my conscious mind. But its struggles are too far off, too confused and chaotic. Scarcely can I perceive the neutral glow into which the elusive whirling medley of stirred up colors is fused, and I cannot distinguish its form, cannot invite it as the one possible interpreter to translate for me the evidence of its contemporary, its inseparable paramour. The taste cannot ask it to inform me what special circumstance is in question, from what period in my past life. Will it ultimately reach the clear surface of my consciousness? This memory, this old, dead moment which the magnetism of an identical moment has traveled so far to importune, to disturb, to raise up out of the very depths of my being? I cannot tell. Now I feel nothing, it has stopped, has perhaps sunk back into its darkness, from which who can say whether it will ever rise again. 10 times over I must essay the task, must lean down over the abyss, and each time the cowardice that deters us from every difficult task, every important enterprise, has urged me to leave the thing alone, to drink my tea, and to think merely of the worries of today and my hopes for tomorrow, which can be brooded over painlessly. And suddenly the memory revealed itself. The taste was that of the little piece of Madeleine which on Sunday mornings at Combray, because on those mornings I did not go out before Mass, when I went to say good morning to her in her bedroom, my Aunt Leonie used to give me, dipping it first in her own cup of tea or tisane. The sight of the little Madeleine had recalled nothing to my mind before I tasted it. Perhaps because I had so often seen such things in the meantime without tasting them on the trays in pastry cooks' windows, that their image had dissociated itself from those Combray days to take its place among others more recent. Perhaps because of those memories so long abandoned and put out of mind, nothing now survived. Everything was scattered. The shapes of things, including that of the little scallop shell of pastry, so richly sensual under its severe religious folds, were either obliterated or had been so long dormant as to have lost the power of expansion which would have allowed them to resume their place in my consciousness. But when from a long distant past nothing subsists, after the people are dead, after the things are broken and scattered, taste and smell alone, more fragile but more enduring, more immaterial, more persistent, more faithful, remain poised a long time, like souls remembering, waiting, hoping, amid the ruins of all the rest, and bear unflinchingly in the tiny and almost impalpable drop of their essence the vast structure of recollection. And as soon as I had recognized the taste of the piece of Madeleine soaked in her decoction of lime blossom which my aunt used to give me, although I did not yet know and must long postpone the discovery of why this memory made me so happy immediately. The old grey house upon the street, where her room was, rose up like a stage set to attach itself to the little pavilion opening on to the garden, which had been built out behind it for my parents. The isolated segment which until the moment had been all that I could see, and with the house, the town, from morning to night, and in all weathers, the square where I used to be sent before lunch, the streets along which I used to run errands, the country roads which we took when it was fine, and as in the game wherein the Japanese amused themselves by filling a porcelain bowl with water and steeping it in little pieces of paper which until then are without character or form, but the moment they become wet, stretch and twist and take on color and distinctive shape, become flowers or houses or people, solid and recognizable. So in that moment, all the flowers in our garden and in Monsieur Swann's park, and the water lilies on the Vivant, and the good folk of the village and their little dwellings, and the parish church, and the whole of Combray and its surroundings, taking shape and solidity, sprang into being, town and gardens alike, from my cup of tea. Okay, I just read pages 58 through 64 of In Search of Lost Time, and it's important to note that in the second half of what I just read, a phenomenon called involuntary memory is depicted, and what involuntary memory is when a sensation reminds you of a past time or experience, particularly in childhood. In this particular case, Proust had involuntary memory when he had a Madeleine. I think that's a type of cake, and it reminded him of his childhood in Combray with his aunt Leonie, and I guess that brought back good memories from his childhood. If this actually happens to me sometimes. In one case, there's this coffee factory that's right next to a bridge, and every time I drive over that bridge, I smell the coffee, and I've been smelling it since I was a kid, and it reminds me of when I grew up in this area as a kid. I spent most of my childhood, well, the beginning of my childhood in this part of the country, then moved later on to a different part, and a few years ago I moved back here, and that smell of coffee brought back memories from childhood. And also, this is all unscripted, so that's why there are a lot of pauses and awkward moments. I swear I'm trying my best. I'm trying not to stutter, and I think I'm doing a pretty good job at not stuttering, because my stutter is pretty dang bad. And I will continue reading In Search of Lost Time. It's really fascinating. And besides that, I will also create videos on various topics such as philosophy, history, psychology, and I will try to make them as interesting and informative as possible. And thanks for watching if you watched. Also, if you have any questions or comments, you can post them in the comments section. I would really appreciate any criticism or advice to help me improve this channel. And yeah.